Today on Histopedia, we're diving into the story of the 13 colonies, the foundation of what would become the United States. What made these colonies so different from one another, despite all being ruled by England? How did their origins, economies, and societies shape them? And why did these differences matter when it came time to break away from Britain? Let's take a closer look. This is the story of the 13 colonies, how they were formed, how they developed, and how their differences laid the groundwork for the future of America. The story of the 13 colonies begins in the early 1600s, a time when European powers were eager to expand their influence across the globe. England, looking to increase its wealth and compete with Spain and France, began establishing settlements along the eastern coast of North America. The first of these settlements was Jamestown, Virginia, founded in 1607 by the Virginia Company, a group of investors hoping to profit from the New World. However, the early years of Jamestown were marked by hardship. The settlers faced disease, hunger, and conflicts with the Powhatan Confederacy of Native Americans. But through perseverance and the eventual cultivation of tobacco, Jamestown grew into a profitable venture. Tobacco became the cornerstone of Virginia's economy and would later spread to other southern colonies. By the 1700s, England had established 13 colonies along the eastern seaboard, stretching from New England to Georgia. The 13 colonies can be divided into three main regions: New England, the Middle Colonies, and the Southern Colonies. Each region had distinct economic practices, cultures, and religious influences that shaped its development. The New England colonies, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire, were primarily founded for religious reasons. These colonies were settled by groups of English Puritans, Pilgrims, and other religious dissenters seeking to escape persecution in England. In 1620, the Pilgrims, a group of English separatists, landed at Plymouth Rock in present-day Massachusetts. They had been granted a charter by the Virginia Company to establish a settlement, but soon found themselves outside of its jurisdiction. Despite facing a brutal first winter, in which nearly half of the settlers perished, the Pilgrims survived and eventually thrived. In 1629, the Massachusetts Bay Colony was founded by Puritans, seeking to build a city upon a hill that would serve as a model for others. The Puritans were strict in their religious practices, believing in predestination and a theocratic society. They banned other religious practices and severely punished dissent, making it a tough place for anyone who disagreed with their views. While Massachusetts was the heart of New England, other colonies like Rhode Island and Connecticut emerged as havens for those seeking religious freedom. Rhode Island was founded by Roger Williams, who was banished from Massachusetts for advocating religious tolerance. Rhode Island became a unique place where people of different faiths could practice freely. Connecticut, led by Thomas Hooker, was founded by people seeking more political and religious freedoms, resulting in the development of the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, one of the first written constitutions in the world. The New England colonies were not as suited to agriculture as the other regions. The rocky soil, short growing season, and harsh winters made large-scale farming difficult. Instead, the economy in New England was based on fishing, shipbuilding, lumber, and trade. Town meetings were a vital part of New England life, where male settlers gathered to discuss and vote on local matters. These meetings created a foundation for self-governance and democratic principles that would later influence the development of the United States. The Middle Colonies, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware, were unique because of their religious and cultural diversity. These colonies were founded with an emphasis on both trade and religious tolerance. New York, originally settled by the Dutch in 1624 as New Amsterdam, was a major center of trade. The Dutch West India Company established the colony to exploit the fur trade, but when the English seized the colony in 1664, it was renamed New York. The city of New York grew into one of the most important ports in the Atlantic world. Pennsylvania, founded by William Penn in 1681, was created as a haven for Quakers, a religious group known for their pacifist beliefs. Penn's Holy Experiment promoted religious freedom, good relations with Native Americans, and democratic governance. He allowed settlers of all religions to live peacefully and established a constitution that guaranteed rights for all, regardless of belief. Pennsylvania quickly became one of the wealthiest colonies, thriving on agriculture, especially wheat, and became a major exporter of grain. New Jersey and Delaware also had their roots in religious tolerance and a mix of agricultural and commercial industries. New Jersey was initially settled by the Dutch, but after the English took control, it was divided into two provinces. Delaware was originally settled by the Swedes before the Dutch, and then the English took over. Both colonies were vital to trade and farming, providing products such as grains, iron, and wood. The middle colonies had fertile soil and a temperate climate, allowing them to produce large amounts of wheat, corn, and other crops. This made the region known as the Breadbasket of colonial America. Cities like Philadelphia and New York were major commercial centers, thriving from the flow of goods and a strong maritime economy. The southern colonies, Virginia, Maryland, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, developed an economy that was heavily reliant on agriculture. These colonies were founded primarily for economic gain, and their wealth was built on the cultivation of cash crops such as tobacco, rice, and indigo. Virginia, the first successful English colony, established a plantation economy early on. The introduction of tobacco as a cash crop in the early 1600s ensured the colony's economic success, but it also created a demand for labor. Initially, this labor came from indentured servants, poor Europeans who worked for a set number of years in exchange for passage to America. However, by the late 1600s, African slaves became the dominant labor force, especially as the demand for tobacco grew. Maryland was founded by Lord Baltimore in 1632 as a haven for Catholics who faced persecution in Anglican England. Although Maryland was established for religious freedom, it quickly became a colony based on tobacco cultivation. The southern colonies also relied heavily on slavery. The plantation economy required a large, inexpensive labor force, and enslaved Africans filled that need, primarily working on large tobacco, rice, and indigo plantations. North and South Carolina were originally one colony, but split in 1712 due to regional differences. The southern part of the colony was more focused on rice and indigo production, which required large amounts of labor, while the northern part was more focused on tobacco. Both colonies were heavily reliant on enslaved labor, and by the 18th century, the African American population outnumbered whites in South Carolina. Georgia, founded in 1732 by James Oglethorpe, was initially intended as a buffer colony between the British and Spanish territories. It was also meant to provide a fresh start for the poor and indebted of England. Over time, Georgia became a plantation economy based on the cultivation of rice and indigo, with slavery being introduced as the colony grew. Despite their differences, the 13 colonies shared some common experiences. By the 1760s and 1770s, tensions between the colonies and Britain had begun to rise. The British government, faced with mounting debt from the French and Indian War, imposed taxes on the colonies, such as the Stamp Act and some Townshend Acts. These taxes angered colonists, who began to resist British rule. The colonies had grown accustomed to a degree of self-governance, and as British control increased, so did the desire for independence. Tensions reached a breaking point in 1775 when the colonies began to fight for their rights. In 1776, after years of escalating conflict, the colonies united to declare their independence from Great Britain, forming the United States of America. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the 13 colonies. We hope this deeper look into their foundations and differences has given you a greater understanding of how these early American settlements shaped the future of the nation. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more deep dives into history on Histopedia.